And I think we're still getting a few more folks, but we'll go ahead and get started. Just pin this up. All right, well, welcome. This is our February 2021. I had to remind myself the year. We are in 2021 Canvas meeting. My name is Brett Mackman. I am with College Autism Network. I'll be your guide through today. For those of you who have been on Canvas meetings calls in the past, you probably know how this works. We'll go over some updates. We'll welcome you all to contribute your thoughts and input regarding different things about autism and post-secondary education. We definitely continue to want to have this serve as a hub for exchanging tools and articles, etc. And then our main time will be allocated toward our feature presenter. Today it's Dr. Laura Graham Holmes. So we'll turn it over to Laura in just a little bit. As a housekeeping reminder for folks, please make sure your name is listed in the meeting agenda. That way we make sure we have that recorded in our meeting minutes and highlight your name. If you are in attendance, I will put a link again to the agenda in the chat. Also, please have your microphones muted if you're not talking, because we just don't want to get any background noise, because that can be distracting for folks. Otherwise, we'll meet you on our end. And if you have any questions, comments, input that you'd like to share, please do so in our chat. As some of you have seen that we've had a lot of thoughts already on favorite and least favorite things about winter as kind of our icebreaker. Yeah, and feel free to speak up too. Turn your microphone off, or I should say turn it on rather, if you would like to share something. So all that to say, we do have a few general updates here at College Autism Network. As always, make sure to be on our Canvas listserv. We've been seeing a lot of research studies being circulated recently in terms of recruitment, thanks to many of our Canvas members for exchanging information about that. So we encourage you to, if you haven't looked at those emails, maybe you might want to look back. It might be applicable to you or someone you know, because again, this is a great community in terms of being able to find participants for really intriguing and useful research studies. We also want to recognize that we have an updated version of our college autism programs list that we recurringly update. So the latest edition from January 2021 illustrates the addition of some new programs and also some changes in links and names and other fine details about existing programs from the past. So those are a few things that we wanted to share on our end. And I'm going to turn it over to TC to provide an update on the Autism and UD design for faculty research work.
Thanks, Brett. Let me know if you can't hear me and I'll put on my headphones. But just a really quick update. We want to start by saying a huge thank you to the almost 90 faculty participants who took part in our research, many of whom came from Canvas. So thank you so much. We appreciate your dedication through the process over the past few months, especially during the pandemic and Christmas. We really appreciate that. So our study was a cross-institutional collaboration research on autism and universal design training for faculty. We're under the leadership of Dr. Kristen Gillespie-Lynch, and our aim was to improve university staff's knowledge and attitudes towards autism and UD via the online training program. The program was designed in a participatory method. We had 14 collaborators around the world. Many of us, well, almost all of us really are part of the Canvas, but many of us are also autistic. So, you know, we've been a part of the process through the whole thing. We got our IRB through City University of New York and University of Stirling. And we're excited to give you the update that we've completed data collection. And we're just beginning our data analysis. So we're actually going to start that with the meeting today. So if you want to learn more about the collaborators who are involved, please go to www.autismresearch.international. I'll put that in the chat. And thank you everyone for your support. And collaborators, I'll be emailing you soon with an update. Thanks.
Oh, that's a really encouraging update. Thanks for sharing, TC. Wow, 90 faculty. That's great. Absolutely. So let's now turn it over to all of you. If you have any, as you might see in our meeting agenda, there's a space for sharing resources, whether it be research studies, that you're conducting or you want others to know about. If you've read an interesting article, if you've discovered a neat resource, we want to allocate some space for that in our meetings. It looks like we have already one example illustrated in the agenda. We'll turn over to Jamie in a second. So if you have anything you'd like to share, to put that either in the chat, to put in the agenda and speak up about it, we welcome that. Jamie, I'm not sure if you want to talk about what you inserted, but please feel free to go ahead and do so.
Sure. I just came across this yesterday, and I haven't been a part of Canvas for very long, so I don't know if this has already been brought up. But the last Canvas meeting I was in about parent participation, the researcher talked about Likert scales and validity. And so when we looked a little bit more into it, just as a background, I'm an accessibility coordinator that supervises soft skill coaching, and I just want to know more about measuring progress with our program. So that piqued my interest, and so I saw that this talked a little bit more in depth about, and this is from 2020, about accessible survey instruments. So it talks about suggested adaptations, like graphics combined with Likerts and things like that. So I thought it was really interesting, so I thought I'd just throw that up here.
Cool. Thank you for extending the conversation on that front, Jamie. That's really useful. And we'll make sure, in addition to being in the meeting agenda, that all of this stuff is in the meeting minutes for folks to access at their own time as well. So thank you for that, Jamie. Other things that folks would like to provide or talk about, this is a good time.
Hi, it's Lee from College Autism Network, and we are beginning work on a project to develop potentially an autism-friendly campus certification. And so we're hosting a couple of brainstorming sessions, and if this is a topic of interest to you, autism-friendly campus certification, like a way to kind of have your campus designated as a great place for autistic students. If you're interested in one of those, one is tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and then the other is on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And if you think you'd like to just sit in on one of these brainstorming sessions and contribute, drop your name in the chat, your name and email in the chat now, and I will send you a link to the Friday or the Tuesday session. Friday at 1, Tuesday at 4. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Looks like there's already much interest in that, so it's going to be very well attended, I'm sure. Certainly want to give space for people to enter their information, and it looks like there's already a lot. Other things that people would like to contribute at this time?
I'll share, but I'll put my camera on. Hold on so you guys can see me.
Sure.
Hey everyone, my name is Island, and I am at MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And I wanted to introduce myself. I am working with Clemson University next year. I'm a occupational therapy student, so what was just mentioned about sensory friendly, or I guess campus certification and having that is it is a really strong interest to me, and kind of something that I would like to work on as well. So just wanted to introduce myself and let anyone know that if you have anything that you want to contribute, just feel free to I guess share your knowledge or experience. I would really enjoy having that, and that's going to be something that we talk about tomorrow as well. Anyways, that's all. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Island. Appreciate you introducing yourself to the group. And forgive me if there's a lapse in communication. My internet went out for a few seconds. So technology, gotta love it. A year into this and we're still having some tech issues. So that's how it is. Thank you, Island, appreciate it. Any other folks want to share anything? Okay, well, if other resources or ideas come to mind, feel free to insert that in the chat at any point. And certainly our Canvas listserv, it's been, as I said at the top of the meeting, it's been pretty remarkable to see how many research studies have been disseminated recently. So that's really a testament to all the good work that you all are doing in spreading the word. So that's wonderful, in addition to the resources that we're sharing. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our featured presenter for February. I love just, and this wasn't planned, but I realized that the notion of HEARTS as the acronym for the program also kind of times well with Valentine's Day around the corner. So that's just a lovely sentiment that had, that's just completely coincidental. But Dr. Laura Graham Holmes is going to present their team's research and the project being entitled Using Formative Research to Develop HEARTS, which is a healthy relationships promoting intervention for young adults on the autism spectrum. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to provide more context on this work. We'll have about 25 minutes or so toward the main presentation. Throughout, feel free to insert any questions in the chat box, which we'll address following Laura's presentation. So we'll definitely have hopefully at least 15 minutes toward that end. So Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you and to share your screen and further introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Graham Holmes. I was a postdoc working with Emily Rothman, Professor Emily Rothman at the Boston University School of Public Health. And she is she has a background in dating violence research and substance use and other sort of adolescent health risk behaviors. Whereas I'm more of an autism and sexuality person. And so we had a really nice coming together around a career pivot award she got from the NIMH to develop this intervention. So I'm excited to tell you about it. And I totally didn't even think of the February part. That's amazing. Now I just started a job. I'm excited to tell some of you because I know you're nearby. As an assistant professor at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College, which is a part of CUNY. So I'm in Brooklyn, and hopefully one day we'll be able to meet you all in person. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and see if I can't. No, don't want to do that. All right. Okay, so like I said, please chime in with questions. I tend to highlight the parts that I'm interested in. So if you are like, wait, what about the data analysis and stuff, please chime in. And I don't know how you guys feel about having your faces up here. Can everyone see these faces that are here on the side of my screen? Or just me?
Yeah, it might just be on your end, Laura.
Okay, great. Okay, I didn't want to make anyone feel anxious. All right, so so this is a relationships intervention. I hope that you'll feel kind of excited about the idea of having this sort of intervention out and around. I know Emily has coordinated with colleges previously who are interested in her dating violence and pornography-based sort of like sexuality education with pornography as kind of a starting point because so many people see it now and probably need to talk about the misrepresentations. So I know she's worked with colleges on these kind of interventions before. So, so just for background, developing and maintaining healthy relationships with peers as friends or intimate partners can be a challenge for any adolescent or young adult, as many of us will remember for ourselves. or know for our kids and our students. In the US, as many as 8% of high school attending youth who have dated in the past year report experiencing physical or sexual aggression by a dating partner. And of adults who have experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence or things like stalking, about 71% of women and 56% of men report that they first experienced partner violence when they were younger than age 25. So the college years are a really important time to focus on intervention for these kind of behaviors. Friendship can also include unhealthy behaviors, and some adults experience overt or relational aggression, exclusion, financial coercion, emotional manipulation, and intimidation by people in their social support networks, although this is kind of a less researched area. Young adults on the spectrum may have difficulty making and maintaining friendships and romantic relationships due to differences in social communication and also stigma associated with being different or having a disability, or due to a sort of accumulated history of difficult or traumatic experiences related to social interactions like bullying, and probably due to many other things, but those are the ones that were top of my mind. A recent meta-analysis found that as many as 44% of autistic youth experience bullying victimization by peers, and 28% engage in peer aggression as well as experiencing victimization. Compared with non-autistic adolescents, autistic adolescents have a 56% chance increased risk of being bullied. So for adults, an analysis of NLTS2 data showed that compared to others with disabilities, autistic adults were significantly more likely to say they never saw friends, never got called by friends, were never invited to activities, and were socially isolated. So that's kind of older data, but still suggests that there's a lot of isolation among adults. And if you've ever run a social skills intervention or been to one, you know that many of these teach sort of social pragmatics, like the importance of taking turns in conversation, showing interest in another person's comments in conversation, making eye contact, not crowding people physically, that kind of thing. Some also teach social skills like perspective taking or self-regulation, but none focus on what might be considered more advanced social skills, like how to tell whether relationships are healthy, coping with breakups, promoting mutuality in a relationship, deciding if a relationship is fulfilling, and being supportive as a friend or partner. So our job here was to create a relationships intervention like this that was a little bit more advanced than what's out there right now. And so as a first step in this development of the new Healthy Relationships workshop for autistic youth and young adults, this study was undertaken to collect formative data. So I'm going to tell you about our interview process with autistic youth and service providers and some feedback we got from our advisory board. And then I'll also walk you through the curriculum very briefly, basically. And then we can talk about what you think. All right. So we recruited a convenient sample of autistic youth via social media advertising and from databases of prior research participants who had consented to be recontacted. Service providers were recruited from within our professional networks to also chime in. And so youth who we were looking for were basically people that we were targeting this intervention to. So 16 to 22, living in the US, had a formal diagnosis of autism. We reviewed documentation, reported that they had one or more close friends, according to a definition that I'll read to you in a second, and could participate independently, basically. And so for the purpose of this study, a close friend was defined as someone who was within a couple years of age, not related to them, not employed to work with them, and someone who they would have spent time with outside of school or work for socializing if it hadn't been for the pandemic, basically. And then I thought this may be of interest. So we also wanted to make sure that we made the most of these only 25 interviews that we could do. So we had a little small assessment for the capacity to sort of participate in this interview independently. And we assessed that based on prospective participants' responses to a few questions that we asked about friends and what was going on in their lives right then. Participants were scored on a scale from 0 to 3 on the amount of social communication, quality of social response, anxiety, and overall quality of rapport with the researcher. And if you've ever given the ADOS, you might kind of recognize some of those categories, although I wouldn't say that we went strictly by, I wouldn't say this was anywhere near what the ADOS is looking for, but more just kind of an impression. And then people who scored 2 or higher on any of those 4 qualities were not eligible to participate. Okay. So participating youth were 16 to 22. We had about half female and a good non-binary contingent in there. We had some pretty good racial diversity. And in this sample, about a little more than half had been employed and also had dating experience at some point. So about half of our sample were college students, and since our age range was 16 to 22, about half were still enrolled in high school, with a couple who were employed or post-college. And what we did was 30 to 60-minute Zoom interviews with participants, with the option of using the chat instead of like verbal speech. And of course they could not have their video on if they didn't want to. And then everyone received a $40 gift card for their time. For youth, we asked questions like, you know, when you think about your social life right now, what are the biggest problems or challenges that you are facing? And we asked like questions about what they had learned from all of these different places, right? Like teachers, counselors, classes, books. What have you learned? And then also like what kind of challenges or problems do you experience with social skills or socializing that no one's ever helped you with before? That basically these kind of resources that you haven't spoken to. And then for service providers, we asked things like what tend to be the major challenges your clients need to overcome to achieve a healthy social life that works for them, and thinking about people who have a solid social life, what kinds of things differentiate them from others who have found socializing more challenging. So again, here we're looking for people who have a little bit of experience with a close friendship, because in thinking about who's going to attend this kind of intervention, we want people who are generally somewhat motivated people who want to be there, basically, people who are at least somewhat motivated to socialize or are interested in thinking about how to be more motivated to socialize. And we understand that not everyone wants to have a lot of relationships or anything like that. So what we really want to find is the fit between like the person and what they want and how they can get there. Okay, data analysis, we used, so we had all the interviews transcribed and we had a content-based analysis method. We read through all of the transcripts to kind of get a sense of the whole and create excerpts for coding. We generated a coding list with codes representing themes that emerged from the data, and then Emily and I both coded each of the transcripts using Deduce. We, of course, talked about our decisions, calculated our inter-rater reliability, consensus codes were applied to discrepancies, and then we looked through each code for sort of cross-cutting themes and illustrative quotations for each theme. And so I'm going to tell you here about the 5 key themes that emerged and show you some of the quotations, and then I'll move into the intervention itself. So the 5 key themes that emerged were: youth found it challenging to remain motivated to make and maintain friendships, overcome anxiety about new friends or continuing friendships, often that was rooted in prior bad experiences, take emotional risks, cultivate reciprocity in relationships, and deal with sexual and emotional boundaries. I'm just taking a pause. Were there any questions about any of the methods or anything like that, or comments so far? Okay, I can't see the chat. So if anyone wants to like chat to me or chat and participate that way, I hope maybe Brett would be willing to read.
I was just going to say, so far, Laura, there aren't any questions, but as they emerge, if you'd like, I can bring them up.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. So the first theme was multiple participants reported that they felt like they did not know how to meet, or they did know how to meet people and they had sufficient basic social skills, but that their challenge in relationships was sort of a lack of motivation to keep the relationships going. I think sometimes spending time alone was more appealing than pursuing social interactions. So this college student, and I won't always read you these, I'm kind of paraphrasing them, but this college student said, in terms of skills getting a relationship, I feel like I'm pretty good at it. My problem is more like wanting to use those skills. I don't want to have social commitments. Some say my challenge is fear of rejection, but I know it can't be just that because I'm afraid of, even afraid of other people saying yes. I just don't want to have any commitments other than just hang out by myself. And then one of my favorite interviewees was a political science major, and he had this whole kind of system that he used because he would forget to reach out to friends if he didn't include them. So he had, in his to-do list, he would include, you know, people and think about like, do I want to contact them every day, every week, every month? And then just include it on the to-do list and check it off once he had done it, which some of you, I was like, that is smart and I might adopt that. Thank you. The second theme was overcoming anxiety rooted in prior bad experiences. And so interviews showed that participants often avoided approaching new people for friendship, were reluctant to engage with existing friends and acquaintances, or quote unquote ruined friendships by needing a lot of reassurance because they were anxious about being rejected or being manipulated and abused. And in many cases, negative experiences with peers in middle school and even elementary school had left these sort of like emotional scars or created insecurities and anxieties that influenced their capacity to stay centered in relationships. So this 17-year-old high school student described, I get very insecure about my friendships, and half the time that ruins it because I'm worrying a lot, and it can be kind of overwhelming for people for me to ask for all this reassurance. And then a special education major who participated using an AAC device said, I think another piece is trauma. I've grown up being taught often pretty explicitly that the way I interact with people is wrong. There's something wrong with me. So I avoid interacting with others because I've internalized that so thoroughly. So like our social anxiety is not always an unfounded fear. Many of us have been mistreated due to our ways of interacting and expressing ourselves, and that can follow us throughout our lives. That was pretty powerful. The third theme was taking emotional risks, which is hard for anyone. So participants expressed a desire to learn more about how to deepen relationships, like how to take friendships from a superficial level into more emotional intimacy. And discussion was about how to feel more closely connected to peers, experience more cohesion in relationships. And these discussions centered on making various types of self-disclosures, including about emotions and also about autism status and just like needs for communication and stuff like that. So some, like those on the left, talked about how concealing your true feelings could lead to resentment, which I thought was pretty good for a 16-year-old. And then others talked specifically about sort of taking cues from relationship partners. So the one on the right says like, okay, he told me some personal stuff, so I thought, okay, this is my chance to tell him some personal stuff I can be open to. Theme 4 was cultivating reciprocity. So participants expressed the importance of mutual interest, equality, and balance for relationships. Some had described how social skills books and classes had sort of focused on the autistic person being a good friend rather than finding people who would be good friends to them, or finding people who were even interested in being friends. And kind of gave this sense that like, if you do certain friendship behaviors, that means you will automatically, the people that you do those to will be your friend, which they had found was not the case. So they learned that having good friendship skills did not always result in everyone wanting to be friends in return. There's sort of a chemistry aspect of friendship that went beyond being a good person. So the person on the left says, what I've learned is you can be as good of a friend as possible, but it's not going to work if the other person isn't interested in being your friend. And I learned that the hard way. And then sometimes if relationships seem one-sided, this can cause more insecurity. Like the person on the right says, it feels to me like I'm always the person in the relationship asking people, hey, you want to hang out? Do you want to do that? And like, do they really want to be my friend if they don't ever ask me that? All right. And the final theme is creating, maintaining, and respecting boundaries. So, so just a definition of like what is what are boundaries, because we don't learn about this in school a lot. So personal boundaries are limits or rules that a person creates to identify safe and preferred ways for other people to behave toward them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. Personal boundaries imply that a person takes responsibility for their own emotions and actions and does not take responsibility for the emotions or actions of others. While some boundaries are or should be universal, like choosing who can touch you in a sexual way, others are person-specific and sort of arise from a person's learning history, beliefs, values, and preferences. And boundaries can apply in all types of relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. I think when I look up literature on this topic, it's always about like therapists, boundaries with clients, and that kind of thing. So any relationship has boundaries. So the person on the left says, sort of describes this unequal situation where they ended up kind of being a therapist to someone who was very depressed. I wondered at times if they really knew anything about me. If I said anything, I felt like they were gonna fall apart and wouldn't be able to piece themselves back together. And then the woman on the right, who was 20 and had a job, was saying that she had a really close friend who she'd had a sexual relationship with or a romantic relationship, but she felt she had crossed this person's sexual boundary in a way that she wasn't really comfortable talking about. And then she sort of said, like, especially when I was taking behavior interventions, basically when I was taking classes in middle school about behavior, I think it would have been really nice to actually learn about how boundaries in dating and sex work. All right. We also, I thought this might be interesting. We also asked participants if the HEARTS intervention should be delivered to single gender participant groups or to mixed gender groups. And about half voted for mixed gender groups. And some were specifically concerned that transgender folks would be left out or feel uncomfortable in same gender groups. And so they also noted how gendered social skills training had been, and the need to steer clear of this. So someone described one really famous and well-known book having like a section for women and a section for men on like dating, as though there's like totally different behaviors for these two groups. So this is the person on the left who said, mixed gender is probably good. I warn against this gender divide, particularly because it solidifies the idea that women or girls should act one way and men or boys should act another. And then we also asked people whether they thought the HEARTS intervention should be facilitated by a non-autistic person, an autistic person, or team facilitated by a non-autistic and an autistic pair. So about 63% voted for the team approach with a neurotypical and an autistic person, and the other 1/3 voted for an autistic facilitator. So having an autistic facilitator was obviously very popular. So this person said, like, a neurotypical person would have better experience about how to get things right. They might know more because part of autism is not knowing. But on the other hand, an autistic person would find it easier to get things across to people because they really get it. Like, they aren't going to say something sort of offensive because sometimes well-meaning neurotypical people can say stuff that's like, ouch, you really don't understand. In terms of what we got from the experts that we asked, so these were people who were service providers of various kinds for autistic young adults. And a couple of them were also parents of autistic young adults. And they said that sort of chronological age is kind of less relevant than social, emotional, and perspective taking skills in making for a cohesive group. And they definitely felt like something other than just kind of a didactic group was needed, something that was more focused on motivation, confidence, and recognizing signs of abuse. We had input from a really fantastic autistic advisory board, so at every stage of development. And so these were 5 people with a big, broad age range in the US and the UK. They gave us a lot of feedback about, especially about eligibility and some content. So in terms of eligibility, we were originally excluding people with intellectual disability because I think it can be difficult to include the entire population of autistic people and make sure that the program is going to work for everyone. And so they suggested don't necessarily just exclude people. It might be better just to give people a sense of what the group is going to be like, and then let them decide whether this sounds like something that they would learn from or not, basically. They also suggested that with our definition of close friendship, that we accept online friends as close friends as well, because even though a lot of people, and we sort of talked to our participants about this too, even though a lot of people felt like there's something that you get from in-person friendship that you don't get from online, a lot of people have really close friends online. So that made sense to us. In terms of content, they really went over all of our materials and gave us some feedback on things. But a few of the highlights were making homework more like an invitation than something that seemed like you definitely had to do it. So that's what we ended up doing, just making it kind of like something that you could do if you liked that homework assignment or wanted to work on that particular thing. Another big thing was we were going to include a section on like apologizing and how to do that correctly. And they were sort of like, you know, you kind of give the impression that autistic people are supposed to go around apologizing all the time and would be the only ones apologizing. And it's really important for people to know how to ask for an apology and accept an apology as well, when that makes sense. So we included information about that. And then they were especially enthusiastic about the content on boundaries, trauma in both yourself and a relationship partner and how to cope with that, and ending or grieving relationships. So I'm going to launch into just telling you a little bit about the intervention next. Are there any questions or comments at this point?
No questions so far, Laura. We have a comment from Jennifer, who appreciates the point about mixed gender, different gender norms and social trainings. So validation there, but that was a good tool. Yeah, I thought that was a really smart insight from that person, and I can imagine how it would be like as a non-binary person coming upon those two chapters in the book, you know. All right, so we are now running our pilot intervention for this program because Emily works fast. So this is a 6-session workshop is how we're kind of framing it. It was always meant to be online via Zoom. I personally really like that because I know technology can be kind of a hump for some people to get over. I also think sometimes if you've ever tried to run a group of with autistic adolescents or adults, it can be kind of hard to get a sort of a cohesive group together in a specific geographical location. And of course it's hard for people to, I mean, not necessarily hard, but I mean, I don't love going to doctor's appointments anyway, and these Zoom appointments are great. So just saying, sometimes it's hard to get out there and go to stuff and come all the way back. And so we are excited to offer this by Zoom, and it's a nice, I guess, silver lining that people are more familiar with it now. So the activities for these hour-and-a-half sessions are didactics, some like presentations of stuff, like one of the sessions is on like neurohealth, and that's kind of a presentation, but also there's a lot of engagement during those, which is nice. Activities and some discussion. People can participate verbally or via chat. And we do have a, like me or Emily facilitate each one, and we have an autistic co-facilitator who kind of helps us. They're amazing, first of all, but they do help us with the chat, reading things from the chat and things like that. The groups have 10 to 20 people in them. I'm not sure if that's how we would end up with this, but we're recruiting right now through the Asperger and Autism Association of New England, AANE. Hopefully some of those words were the right abbreviations for that. And they've been really great, and not everyone is participating in the research component, so we have bigger groups. We did end up having a participant's age from range in age from 18 to 44.
And something that's been pretty interesting for us is that Emily's running 2 of these right now, a nighttime class and a daytime class. And there are kind of, people have sort of sorted themselves into them in different ways. So the nighttime class is a lot of people who have jobs, and we didn't mandate a formal diagnosis for these classes because that wasn't necessarily the population that we were looking for. We were happy to have anyone in there. And so a lot of the people seem to have either later diagnoses in this nighttime class, or they are sort of pursuing diagnosis now and they're just trying to learn as much as they can. And so the daytime classes tend to be people who don't have jobs and might be having a little more challenges with things like relationships and getting jobs. And so I think, but Emily says, I haven't been to any of the daytime classes yet, but she says those participants are especially engaged and excited about the class, and they are using it to socialize. So Emily will like turn off her Zoom feed, her mic, like she just leaves basically for a while after the class is done, but leaves the Zoom room open, and people are using that as a good time to socialize. So I think that's been really positive. All right. The content for this is, I want to leave some time, so I'll kind of hurry through this part, but the content for this 6 sessions. So the first one is kind of defining healthy relationships, thinking about warning signs of abuse, and sort of thinking about your readiness to socialize. And then the second one is ways to meet new people, being patient with the pace of new relationships, and kind of thinking about the different sort of, you know, a new relationship can kind of be on a non-linear path. It's not always like the intimacy is kind of a linear thing from nothing to we're best friends now. So thinking about that. Talking about how to talk about autism status when the people want to, increasing motivation to engage socially. And then the third one is about coping with relationship anxiety, whether that be just the typical anxiety that anyone might feel when there's a possibility of being rejected, or based on prior experiences that people have had. The fourth session is about boundaries. So just managing these and knowing how to apologize when you overstep, and ask for an apology when someone else oversteps, and sort of enforcing your own boundaries. We might have moved this neurohealth session a little bit earlier because we got some feedback that it would be useful to do that from the advisory board, but this is kind of like understanding how the food you eat and the sleep you get and the water you drink and all of these things impact you in a relationship, like how that's really very connected, you know, understanding sort of fight and flight responses and freeze and stress responses, and then talking about some easy coping options. And then ending relationships. So how do you know when a relationship should end? How do you do this well and gracefully, basically, and coping with a relationship that ends? I'm just going to show you a couple of things from session 1. So we kind of start this out with, of course, an introduction. And then we have this a card sort that we prepare on an app called Padlet, with basically a bunch of different behaviors that range from like clearly unhealthy behaviors like slapping someone to healthy behaviors like listening to someone, and some that are kind of in between, sort of like mildly controlling behaviors that require more discussion. And so we just go through for like 20 to 30 minutes and have a good discussion about where to place these in like their buckets of unhealthy, you know, in the middle, and healthy behaviors. And I think it was really clear that some people were realizing like, oh, some of my behaviors haven't been so great, or like some of the behaviors I've seen haven't been so great. So this was really useful. We have a power and control wheel, and then there's this kind of readiness ruler. I think this is, Emily has done a lot of interventions that use motivational interviewing, and so this is kind of something that pops up in a lot of our sessions. This idea, like, how motivated do you feel to make the effort to reach out to people and socialize? Because it can be very exhausting, and I know for anything that I need to do that's exhausting, like PT, for example, I need to be very motivated to do that. This is the power and control wheel that we made. These are pretty common for dating violence interventions, and we sort of adapted it for autism. And we talked through this a little bit, but mostly we sent it home with people, and that invitation to do work after the class was like, watch some of your favorite shows or some of your favorite media, and think about like how some of these whether you see some of these behaviors in there, and then bring that back and we'll talk about it. So that's that. It's going really well so far. I think we don't really have a lot of data yet, but I wanted to tell you guys that we are recruiting for our next round. So Emily and I will both run groups starting in March, also at the nighttime and the daytime level. And we're looking for autistic people 18 to 44 who are interested in participating in this 6-week intervention. And so they get paid about $200 to do the research aspect of it. And if they don't want to do the research aspect, that's also fine. And I think it's a free intervention for everyone. I'm pretty sure. So I'll send around a little blurb after this in case you think this might be good for someone that you know. We're also recruiting for our alcohol on the spectrum study, and thank you all so much for some of you helped us to recruit some of these 40 people who completed interviews with us. This one's kind of a hard one because it's only for underage drinkers and non-drinkers 16 to 20 years old. But I think the college students have been great with these. So now we're looking for people to take a survey either online or by phone with me, which has been actually really fun to go through with people. And they get a $40 gift card for completing that. So I'll include that in the blurb in case you want to send that out. And maybe if people are interested, I can come back and talk about what we found on that in the future. All right, so I'm going to unshare my screen and just ask if there are, oh, there we go, okay.
All good.
Great, questions or comments about anything?
Thank you very much, Laura. We're getting some questions in the chat. Now, John had asked, how have you considered a session about moving relationships to the next level and what to consider when doing that?
Yeah, I think that is a lot of what we talk about throughout is what to consider when moving relationships to the next level. So yesterday, I know we talked about at yesterday's group, and Emily's running one right now. That's why she's not here. So sorry about that. We talk about where to meet people and how you need to build up to, or like how to meet people and what to say. So we did another of those sorting activities and talked through different things that you could say and how you need to kind of build up to that first. And then after that, we're going to talk about sort of building intimacy and how you move a relationship from more of a superficial level to a deeper relationship. And I know that we'll also talk about moving things from a friendship to a romantic relationship in there. So it's definitely, I feel like probably one of the hardest things that people said that they struggle with, besides just being motivated to like keep up with a friendship. So yeah, that will be part of the intervention too. Thank you for asking that.
Not seeing any other questions at the moment. Or nope, it looks like, okay, now they're coming. Susan is asking, well, first complimenting you, very interesting. Is the curriculum available? Are there any publications out of this yet?
Yeah, good question. So Emily first had an OAR, small OER grant to make a dating curriculum that we built this curriculum off of. Some of the feedback about that dating curriculum, like healthy dating relationships curriculum, was, oh, this would be great if you expanded it to include friendships and coworkers and other relationships. And so that's what she's doing for this this K-18 award. But that is actually out there on the internet. You can find it. And she has expressed that she's happy to talk to people about that, about running it, yourself. And that has a publication that I should be ready to like jump in the chat with, but I'm not. So maybe I can send that around with the blurb. But yeah, that has been published. Maybe in like the journal of, I don't know, somewhere. So I'll send that around.
Cool. Yeah, we can include that in the meeting minutes and all the other materials to have it as one package.
That's a good idea.
We still have time for some questions as we're waiting for potentially some others to come into the chat. I'll throw one in there, Laura. So I won't type it out, I'll verbalize it. I guess one curiosity is because your participants, your youth participants encompass a broader age range, right? So high school students, some college students, some folks out of college. Were there any nuances that you all identified just based on like life experience? Because I imagine new opportunities that emerge in college also influence navigating relationships.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good question. So I think that people felt to some extent like they should be taking advantages of the opportunities that college presented, and they wanted that kind of college experience that you think of where you're having a lot of belonging and going to social events and stuff. Partially because of COVID-19, we may have picked up on a little less of that than we normally would have. But I know that some people were kind of like, I want to stay in my room all the time, but my sister is always getting me out of there. Or like my roommate is always sort of bringing me into conversations with people. And so part of it was just that it's such a social time for everyone. And if you can find if there's someone in your life who can be kind of a just a supportive friend to you, basically, you can branch out with their network, which I think a lot of us probably experienced in college. So I think that kind of came up and was a bit of a nuance, because people who were in high school had kind of been around the same people forever, and felt like, oh, everyone already knows me. If they wanted to be friends with me, then we would already be friends. So there's definitely an opportunity there.
Great. We do have a couple more questions. Susan asks another one. Have you considered HEART's interface with tackling teenage together?
That's a good question. We've thought about HEART's like as a kind of a component that could latch onto other interventions, even like something like the peers program. I think they might have a dating intervention going now, but like to be kind of a 201 to a 101 intervention. And I think it's a really good point that like we're talking about sex in the sense of talking about boundaries. So tackling teenage together is like a sexual health education intervention that does have some nice RCT evidence for it at this point. And so I think it's a really good point that if you sort of need that foundation to be thinking about in a pretty clear way about sexual relationships. Like everyone should have that. Not saying that everyone does, but it would be good. And so that's actually a really nice idea. So thank you, Susan.
And one more question. We may have time for one other, but Kristen asks, first complimenting you on the thoughtful design and the advisory board of autistic people. Question is, do you feel that any aspects of the curriculum and ways that people engage with it are impacted positively and or negatively by the online modality?
That's a good question. I hope that we will be asking people that question to find out what they thought about it. I think it's really positive that people can use the chat and still be included. I know we also do that in our advisory board meeting, and there are some people who just, a couple people who just keep their videos off, like in here, and talk through the chat, and I kind of voice what they're saying, and it makes for a really nice conversation. So I think that in some ways it increases accessibility because it's a little bit more comfortable to chime in, and there's always a nice conversation going on in the chat. And then I think like last time I saw that there was one person had like his mom helped him sign on. So I think that there are probably some challenges to getting on Zoom and staying engaged with it. I know I have a hard time staying engaged with it, especially when you have your computer in front of you. So I think that there are probably some negatives too. So far, people seem to be pretty engaged. Like even the people who have their cameras off are really talking a lot and stuff. So I think it's been positive and on balance, like more accessible than having a group in person would be.
Great. We have, this will be our final question in the interest of time. And we have one more. So, so Laura, if you can address each of these very concisely in the interest of time. First, Alex asks, what do you think about extending curriculum to talk about online dating or dating apps?
I love that idea. And there is an OAR sexuality resource that's been published. It's and I wrote the online dating content, even though I've never online dated, but I promised I crowdsourced a lot of good info into there from people, so that we can add that to here in case people are interested in that. And I see the other question actually is, do people stay in contact after the group? That's a great question that we should probably be asking them and reporting on. We haven't finished running. I'm not sure if Emily reported that for their dating curriculum previously, but we are still in the middle of running our first round of this one. So I guess we'll find out, but that is definitely my hope, that people will meet people. And I know that that's a big interest for them because a lot of them talked about it in the interviews.
Wonderful. Thank you for that question there, Nikki. All right. I think this about wraps up our time. Thank you again, Dr. Laura Graham Holmes, for your presentation, and pass along our appreciation to Emily too for her contributions. Glad to have all of you here for this Canvas meeting. We definitely invite you to return back literally like a month from today. It'll be Thursday, March 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We're maintaining this Thursday consistency, but varying the time zones to be reflective of different folks' availability. So we're actually going to be having our colleagues from Australia, from CUNY University. So they're going to be talking, Dr. Craig Thompson and Dr. Melissa Black will be talking about autistic adults' success factors for employment and beyond. So certainly this has been a conversation piece in the Canvas community. If you all remember some of Dr. Jonathan Vincent's work from last year on that topic broadly as well. And continue to have more programming, as you'll see in the months to come. So we encourage you to stay engaged on the Canvas listserv, share resources. We will be sending materials related to today's meeting, including an agenda, excuse me, I should say a meeting minutes, no longer an agenda, meeting minutes, a video recording from today, as well as materials that Laura can share as well. So we look forward to seeing you all next month. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you back here shortly. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, for the great feedback and the questions.